Good to be here.
All right, well, let's talk about Mr. Comey out of the box here. He had a lot thrown at him the past month. How did he do today?
Well, you know, if you were on one side of the aisle, you thought he did very well. If you were on the other side of the aisle, you thought maybe he didn't do so well, Frank. But at the end of the day, I thought he held his own. Tough questioning for better than 2 hours. And I think at the end of the day, the American people learned a whole lot about where he is on both this potential investigation that's been ongoing and what may be occurring in the future.
Well, we did learn a lot, Brian. Let's start with the reaction to the fact that Mr. Comey felt it was important to take detailed notes after each of his meetings or encounters with the president. What does that tell you?
Well, I think there was a basic distrust of the president from James Comey, and therefore he documented those meetings. He alluded to the fact that he had not done the same when he had met with President Barack Obama. So for whatever reason, he thought he needed to document things, and find that curious, but it was what he felt he needed to do.
And Mr. Comey also admitted to releasing information through a law professor to ultimately get what he got today, a public hearing. Can he face charges for that, leaking that information?
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, you know, leaking information is against the law. And in this case, he leaked information relative to meetings he had with the president. Somebody else will have to judge the enormity of that or lack thereof. But at the end of the day, obviously, Washington is a city of leakers. And now you find out that the head of the FBI, well, the former head of the FBI, after he was head of the FBI, then also leaked himself. So it's not a good story, Frank.
How about with respect to tapes? Comey said today, quote, "Lordy, I hope there are tapes." Is the pressure on now the White House to produce tapes if they even exist?
Well, it was the president himself who referred to a taping system or potentially tapes. If there's a taping system, I think eventually perhaps Mueller will get his hands on them and listen for himself. And of course, from Comey's point of view, he thinks it exonerates him in terms of what he said during those discussions with the president. So, you know, it's one more curveball in this whole thing.
And President Trump's attorney denied much of this. How does the president spin this in the next 24 hours? And can he ultimately face those obstruction charges that they've been talking about?
Well, it's a great question, and I think how he has to spin it is that you heard nothing today that was a crime per se. There is the allusion to obstruction of justice, potentially, but that is all going to come out in the wash, as they say. I think for President Trump, he's going to say, hey, you know, nobody laid a glove on me. Now, of course, this is a much bigger story. Whether people, Russians, for example, worked with associates of Donald Trump, that's a whole other story. But I think even the former FBI director made it clear that Donald Trump was not the subject of the investigation.
Well, it is far from over. Brian Sobel from our sister station down in L.A. Brian, hey, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
All right, Brian, thanks. Our coverage of James Comey's testimony continues at KTVU.com. You'll find the